All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for this particular slot of the 24-hour event this year. We are extremely excited to entertain you, hopefully, for the next hour or so. We are aiming for probably about 45 to 50 minutes, and then there's going to be some time for a live Q&A session. My name is Andy. I'm the research lead here at CNS, and I'm here with two of my brilliant students. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey everyone, I'm Mudrika Ala and I'm a final year data science graduate student. I'm working on an independent study with Professor Andy.
Thank you, Mudrika. And Shreyas, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Shreyas Sawan. I'm yet another final year data science graduate student and working with Professor Andy on improvising the HRA organ gallery, which will be out soon, hopefully. Yeah.
Yes, constantly in development. I just started the timer, and whenever the timer is done, we're going to go over to the Q&A live.
Awesome.
All right, so you can see we have compiled this beautiful slide here with all of our beautiful faces. All of our work here is going to be presented in the slide deck. Later on, we're going to switch and actually dive into some Unity, like the game engine that we use to develop our stuff. And we might even show you some code. Well, we will show you some code. So I want to frame this hour by talking a little bit about what exactly virtual reality is. Many of you might just not be familiar with it. And I want to start with this concept from the 1990s called the reality-virtuality continuum. So two researchers, Milgram and Kishino, presented this in this really fascinating paper where they proposed that we can describe reality and virtuality on a spectrum along 3 dimensions: the extent of world knowledge, the extent of presence metaphor, and the reproduction fidelity. So if you look at the bottom here, this is what the continuum looks like. On the left side, we have an environment that is entirely real. There is no virtual element whatsoever. On the right side, you have an environment that is entirely and completely virtual, where everything is modeled and everything is controllable by design. And in the middle is where you get this interesting ground that in this paper they called it mixed reality. We have a little bit of a different definition there of what mixed reality is. But the example they give here, or that the example that we chose here, is Pokemon Go. Obviously, that didn't exist yet in 1994. Where the charm is that parts of the environment are real. Well, in fact, the majority of the environment is real. But then there are small sprinkled in elements of virtual content. In this case, the Pokemon here. You guys know what that Pokemon's name is? Okay, which Pokemon is that?
Oh wait,
I don't know. It's probably after the Johto journey, so I stopped watching after Johto journey. So I'm not sure.
The last time I watched Pokemon was in 2000. That Pokemon might not have existed back then.
Yeah, it's a water type Pokemon, that's for sure. But I don't know the rest.
I remember, but I don't recall its name.
Okay. But good, at least we know it's a water Pokemon. So it means we cannot
Yeah.
send a fire Pokemon against it, right?
Yes.
I don't.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so that is the mixed reality. We would probably call it augmented reality today. You can actually see augmented reality is listed over here. And augmented reality is where the majority of the content is real and there are parts of virtual content sprinkled in. You then have a wide middle ground, and that is commonly what we call mixed reality today. For example, recently with the release of the Meta Quest 3, which we have here, the Meta Quest 3 has a video pass-through that allows you to see your environment in a relatively high resolution and high frame rate video feed, and then you have latent content over there. That is also called mixed reality. These terms kind of change their meaning over time. Like when we did that stream last year, the definition was still a little bit different. Then we have a part on the spectrum that has died out, at least the concept has. Oh, I should say the term has, the concept in some capacities probably still exists. It's augmented virtuality, where the majority of the content is virtual, 3D generated, and there's a little bit of, for example, video content sprinkled in. In the 90s, there was I never played this, but there were a series of games where you had like really crude virtual environments, and then you had like actors that were filmed in front of screens and being put in there, and that was then kind of an interactive point and click game. You could basically argue something like the new Avatar movies, where really the majority of the entire movie is is 3D generated, and the actors are just kind of sprinkled in via green screens. That could be considered augmented virtuality, but again, the term didn't really survive. And then finally, on the right side is a screenshot from the excellent Half-Life Alyx. Everything is virtual. This is just a video game. Okay. Now, the realm that we're talking about today is on this side. This is the virtual environment. But the reality-virtuality continuum, the whole spectrum of the tech, encompasses all of this. And then you can see here, these are these 3 dimensions that I mentioned earlier, the extent of world knowledge. So here on the left side, which corresponds to the dog here, the world is completely unmodeled. We don't have a virtual model of this world. This is just the physical existence. On the right side, the world is completely modeled, which gives us full control over it. And then in the middle, we have a partially modeled world, which of course means that, for example, for this, the Pokemon is modeled, but our application needs a model of the environment, and typically this is done with spatial tracking or with LiDAR or some other form of depth cameras. And this is very, so that part is very interesting. But the extent of world knowledge that we have here is complete. The second one is the extent of presence metaphor. This is not really all that relevant anymore, simply because the hardware has gotten so much better. So on the left side, you would just have everything on a monitor. On the right side here, you would have real-time imaging. I don't exactly know what the authors meant by that. We generally consume VR via HMDs today, head-mounted devices, right, or headsets. There's of course also still screens. There is some virtual reality on screens, but wall-based or screen-based virtual reality, I would say it has gone down in importance just because these headsets are so ubiquitous now and so affordable. Large screens mean that your screen has to be able to display stereoscopic images, and you need a viewing device for it. And yeah, it's different. It's more involved. The HMDs, I would say, are also easier to develop for, right? Like you guys develop for VR now. What's your impression so far?
I think it's more easy, like, visualizing and interacting with a virtual environment via HMDs than via large screens. Yeah.
You can also take them with.
I might also like to add on to that, like working for, I was actually interning for an experiential marketing firm where they did use some large screen devices where you can like interact by hands, and they used to just capture those motions. But again, those were cumbersome, and having a head mounted display would just make things easier and accessible for the end user to just see those things and interact it with pretty easily, since you also have the controllers in your hand.
Right. Yeah, there's like the large screen setups that I've seen, they used an Xbox or usually an Xbox controller. So you kind of have that, but I mean, it's one controller and it doesn't track any kind of movement. So the inputs that you have are just really limited. It's basically like being on a 2-dimensional monitor, kind of video gamey setup, except everything is stereoscopic. And then finally, we have the reproduction fidelity. And again, the hardware is getting better and better and more affordable. So we don't really do VR or any virtual content with simple wireframes unless we are modeling something very complex. Then you can see high definition video. Well, ray tracing has become extremely big, especially in video gaming. I am not familiar with how supported ray tracing is for VR. My understanding is that for the kind of consumer grade hardware, we have probably not as much yet. And finally here, 3D HD TV. This is very definitely a 90s term. So yeah, some of these are outdated, but they could certainly be updated. I know that there is a paper from, I think, 2020 that presents an updated reality virtuality continuum, just with all of the consumer grade hardware that we now have. So what we mean by VR in our talk here is this. A head-mounted device with controllers. Just again, as an overview, there are 2 large-scale flavors of VR that we would like to cover. One you can see here in the middle, we recently had this rise of consumer-grade VR. There are many options in terms of price, resolution, field of view, size, and tracking. And there are also different content delivery platforms. There's the Oculus Store, there's Steam, there's WebXR, which is browser-based. And what you can see here are kind of two paradigms for VR. One is, this is the HTC Vive, but it's also the Steam Index, the Rift. There are quite a few of these setups. These are tethered devices. So the device is basically a glorified display, and it goes into a link box here, which then has three cables. One goes to power, one goes to the graphics card, and one goes to a USB slot on the computer. So the important thing here is that this device, the Vive, it cannot track itself. It needs tracking stations across the room, which doesn't make it very portable. It's a home system. Okay, the Vive is from 2016, so it's rather old at this point. You can see then the controllers and the headset are tracked via these tracking stations. And most importantly, also, you need a powerful PC or laptop to actually render the graphics and then just piping them through to the headset. Now, contrast that with the Quest 2 or the Quest 3 and a variety of other standalone headsets that track themselves. They use a system called inside-out tracking that allows them to orient themselves in space. And the nice thing, of course, also is that these cameras can then be used to produce a video feed coming from the outside to the inside to the user, which is what the Meta Quest 3 is doing very nicely. So these are kind of two large paradigms. And one of the really interesting pieces, I think, on a design level about virtual reality controllers is their versatility. So on the left side, you can see the mouse. The mouse is an extremely successful input device. It has three buttons, normally a left button, a right mouse button, a mouse scroll wheel that also serves as a button, and an XY position. The mouse was invented in the 1960s by Doug Engelbart. Have you guys ever seen the mother of all demos?
Is it the one with the ball?
Not really. It's a 1968, I believe, demo by Engelbart, who was a research scientist, I believe, in California. I believe at Stanford, but I'm not entirely sure. Engelbart put together the first thing of what we would today call a personal computer or a PC. So a keyboard and a mouse. He had to invent the mouse to get the setup together. This was kind of a byproduct of his invention. And then you see him, this is from 1968, this is crazy. He sits there and edits a shopping list together with his assistant who's at another PC. They're basically doing Google Docs in 1960, before the World Wide Web was invented. Just absolutely mind-boggling. But that's how old the mouse is. So we have an extremely established input device that anyone can learn how to use. And then now we have these novel interaction devices, these VR controllers, that are multidimensional in any capacity. For one, you have two of them. We have two hands, we have two controllers. Then instead of just having three buttons, we now suddenly have all of these different buttons. We have grip buttons and trigger buttons. But we also have different modalities. You know, a mouse button, it knows basically three states: clicked, not clicked, or released, and held. Here suddenly now you have buttons that can do the same thing, but you also have suddenly these joysticks here. And the joystick suddenly has a direction and it has an angle. And you suddenly have multidimensional input. Likewise, a mouse has X and Y position, but then it also the controller has a X, Y, and Z position, so three-dimensional position, but it also has rotation. This is what we call 6 degrees of freedom. Okay. And let me see if I can get some pointers going here. Here we go. I can see the pointers. So we have multidimensional input. So to get towards what we are actually developing, there's this vision that has been with these kind of virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality technologies for a while, which is its usage in medicine, in the medical fields in general. What you see here is what's probably a stock image of two folks, presumably surgeons or nurses, in an operating room looking at a 3D model of a brain. Presumably, this is a specific parameterized model that belongs to one patient, the patient that they're about to operate on. So you would hope this is not the first time that they're looking at this model. What you can see is that none of them is wearing a headset. And that doesn't, so
Mm.
this is probably some kind of holographic projection, which we don't have yet, not at that quality anyway. So this is clearly like a futuristic kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then there's some kind of like coordinate system around it, but we don't really see anything. There's no overlays, no data on top of it. And this is kind of representative of many of these kind of marketing futuristic materials. They always look extremely cool, but if you look just a little bit closer, you actually have no idea what they're trying to do and how they would do it given what we can see here. So this is the vision. The reality looks like this. So there are many VR and AR applications for learning anatomy and physiology. It's a natural fit. Anatomy and physiology are on organs and on the body. The body is three-dimensional, and it is also layered, which makes it very hard to depict in 2D, at least in a comprehensive manner. You can make very nice, like, cross sections in 2D, and those exist, but in 3D and with all of these layers, it gets very complicated very quickly. So you can see two existing applications where people can dissect or pull apart muscles, for example. Here we have a human with a whole with organs. I assume this is a heart. There's a vasculature in there. And of course, these models vary in detail from either photorealistic. This is slightly more photorealistic, although it still looks really like computer generated. And then there's also low level of detail. This is more low level of detail, more illustrative. Of course, the more data or the more realistic you want, the more anatomically realistic you want it to look, the more photorealistic it's going to look. And then for more illustrative purposes and illustrating high level concepts, and then you get these more abstract, low level of detail things. Now, to our knowledge, none of these existing applications actually display any actual patient data, because this is not about learning from patients. This is about learning generalized anatomy. Okay. And then, of course, in medical education, at some point, you will dissect cadavers, and this is where you actually get to meet the real thing. But of course, there's also no data there. So the question then is, well, okay, so where is the data? And this is where this being a data visualization in VR panel comes in. So this is one of my favorite quotes by Daniel Keim, who was a German computer scientist. So visual data exploration seeks to integrate humans in the data exploration process, applying their perceptual abilities. The basic idea is to present the data in some visual form, allowing data analysts to interact with it. So what this quote speaks to is that data visualization is a symbiosis of computers and humans. And it is really for humans only. A machine does not need a visualization of a data set to quote unquote understand it. And so, of course, many formalizations have been made for making, interpreting, and teaching data visualization. One of them is the data visualization literacy framework. You can see some pieces of it here. This is all outlined in this paper from a couple of years ago. And data visualization in general presents a variety of perceptual challenges, but those are especially pronounced in virtual reality. So in general, you could say 2D is simplicity. 2D can be printed on a sheet of paper. 2D only has 2 dimensions. VR, however, is 3-dimensional by nature. That's kind of the whole point of being in virtual reality. And so there are some perceptual challenges that suddenly appear that have to be solved. So one is the problem of occlusion. So occlusion is a depth cue. We need occlusion in 3 dimensions to understand how far away an object is from us, to understand the Z dimension. So there's this excellent kind of observation from Mansner based on Ware's book from 2008, that we do not really experience the world in 3D, we experience it in 2.05D. So we have, if you look in front of you, you have the full Y dimension, the full X dimension, but it is limited to what you can see in the Z dimension because you have this occlusion going on. And it is important for us because we know if one thing occludes another, it means it is closer to us. And this is a very basic perceptual capability that we have. But it is a problem for data visualization because it means that a display can become cluttered very quickly. You can see an example here. This is from a visualization that we made a couple of months ago. This is a network visualization. And you can see this is in VR. This is like room size, but as you move around, stuff starts occluding each other. And then similarly, there's the foreshortening effect. And this shows a size difference where there shouldn't be none. So another important depth cue for something being farther away is that it appears smaller. If you have 2 people that are like your 2 hands, put them in front of you, and then you move one farther away, it's going to start to appear smaller. This is the foreshortening effect. This is all fine and good. This is an important depth cue for us to understand how far away something is. At the same time, it's a problem for dataviz because size is an important graphic variable that allows us to encode differences between values. And suddenly, you know, we see these two cubes here. This is when they're being looked at the same distance. And this is when they're looked at if they're farther apart. And then suddenly you can see these huge size differences, even though they're the same size. And then finally, of course, 3D has a cost. It has an interaction cost that can be measured in time and cognitive effort. So it takes time to understand the 3D visualization because suddenly you have another dimension, which necessitates interaction, meaning you have to maybe control a camera and inspect the data from different angles. And it also has a cost of cognitive effort as a consequence of that. So Stephen Few in his 2012 book, Show Me the Numbers, said, do not use 3D as a purely aesthetic choice, and that's very important. If you look into Excel, for example, into the bar graphs there, they have by default a 3D option. There's absolutely no reason why there should be a 3D option because there's no, in this for a case, for example, here, there is no three-dimensional data dimension. It's just purely for aesthetic choices. And suddenly it becomes pretty pointless. It's just becoming clutter. And in general, I think if we talk about, you know, using VR for dataviz, this is something that we always have to kind of defend ourselves against. Like, does this have to be VR? Does this have to be 3D? So these are things that we have to keep in mind. That brings me to the concept of information-rich virtual environments. This is from a paper from Doug Bauman and his co-authors by 2003, where he talks about building three-dimensional environments that are enriched with abstract two-dimensional data. So this is an example from the paper. Again, this is 2003. You can see this is a human throat. We can see back here, these are the tonsils. Then here, these are blood vasculature, I presume. And then you can see these two-dimensional overlays here that show just two-dimensional data about it. So this is a label, the right palatine tonsil, and then this is the surface area, I assume, so 295 square centimeters. And then he also talks about having a three-dimensional environment where you have these objects, in this case, these just simple geometric primitives, that are also enriched with data. So for example, we have a, I don't know what is this called, this geometric thing here? Is that a diamond?
I think it's a pyramid.
A rhombus? Okay.
It looks
Is
like
that a pyramid?
Okay, let's say it's a rhombus. And then you can see that it's annotated with these kind of flat data here. So this is an information virtual environment. We're going to get back to this concept at the end of our event here. With that, I would like to give a brief overview over the Human Reference Atlas, and let's see how we're doing on time here. We got 28 minutes left. Okay. I want to give a brief introduction to the Human Reference Atlas, and then we're gonna talk about the organ gallery, and then you guys are gonna be on the spotlight. All right. So the Human Reference Atlas is an effort funded in part by ZenNet here is acknowledged, but also by HubMap and other funding efforts that defines the 3D shape and space of anatomical structures and cell types in the human body, where the cell types can be found within the anatomical structures. And then there are also biomarkers that characterize these cell types. And these are linked to these ontologies here. The Human Reference Atlas also defines how new data sets can be mapped into the HRA using the visible human or the vasculature common coordinate frameworks. And it is provided as linked open data for spatial and biological structural data. We will only cover these two here in our talk here. The HRA is authoritative, meaning there's expert agreement on what these structures should be named, how they should be modeled. It is computable. That's very important for us because we, with our VR applications, are users of the HRA. So it supports API queries and user interfaces, which again is us, publishes LOD so that it can be connected to existing ontologies. Also, it means that, you know, users like us, we don't have to get in licenses. All of the IRIs resolve. It's easier to use on the computational level. It is also open, which means that anyone can use it and also contribute to it, and is also continuously evolving. And by us using a VR view on it, that is a continuously evolving use case. I'm going to go forward here to the spatial data. So let's talk about what the data actually is that comprises the HRA. And of course, it is spatial data, so it's inherently interesting for us with VR. And there's a graphical image of a kidney coming up here. So in order to build the HRA, we are working with dozens of teams that collect tissue, and we work with them to register this tissue into reference organs. Now, documenting these tissue extraction sites, however, is non-trivial because in the best case scenario, we have photos of the reference organ that a tissue block here is extracted from and then is laid out on these cutting boards. But that is like the best case scenario. And of course, this is not inherently computable. So we modeled in the as part of our work for doing the HRA. This goes beyond this team here, of course. We modeled these reference organs. In this case, you see the male left kidney that the user can then use to register a virtual tissue block into it. Okay, and of course, this then works across scale in a so-called common coordinate framework. This is going to provide a unique address for each cell in the entire human body. Okay, and of course, you know, the CCF is across scale. So we talked about the organs. This is at the organ level. This is a kidney. This here is a renal corpuscle. So this is a functional tissue unit. This is a clump of cells that has one particular function. And then we can go down there to individual cells, and then from there we can go down to genes. This is a different view of the same thing. This shows these different nested reference systems inside of each other. So we have an atlas reference system, which we can see. This is the global reference system. And then in there, we currently have two bodies. We have a male and a female reference body. And then nested inside each of them is around 30 organs. And each of these organs has its own reference system. And then the reference system, this reference system again, contains a multitude, sometimes hundreds of tissue blocks that all have their own reference system. And then from there, we go down to functional tissue units until we're finally at the cell, which also has its own reference system. So this is the common coordinate framework and how it's kind of stacked up in a multidimensional way. So people register data into the HRA, or register it into the reference organ, I should say, using the registration user interface, which again, you can see the same 3D model applied here across all of these systems. And then you can also see this is the sister interface to the registration user interface. This is the exploration user interface, where you can then expect all of the existing three-dimensional tissue blocks that have been registered. Okay, and then let's move forward to the biological structure piece. This one is going to be very quick. I want to briefly talk about the so-called anatomical structure and cell type plus biomarker tables. This is a data structure that's very essential for the HRA. 80% of biomedical knowledge is unstructured, meaning it comes from papers and is written up there in a very smart way, but you have to read the paper to understand the data, of course, but it also means that it's usually not computable or not as easily computable. So AST plus B tables are listings of anatomical structures with their cell types and with their biomarkers. And those standardize how information is captured, formatted, and labeled for each of these structures and cell types and biomarkers. It also organizes the existing knowledge about these and then finally links it out to ontologies. So Uberon, for example, for anatomy, which is cross-species, cell ontology. And then we also use Hugo for the biomarkers. Of course, reading tables is, especially tables that are that big, can be challenging. So this is a visualization of what one of the tables look like. So for example, here we have the heart, and then the heart has an anatomical structure in red, which have cell types in blue and which have biomarkers in green. And then so the heart, for example, has the atrioventricular junction, which consists of 4 sub-AS, right? Likewise, it has the right atrium, which has the vasculature, which has all of these cell types that are typically found in it. And so, to make it 3D again, we have these 3D models. Now we're showing the kidney. Earlier we were showing the lung. Earlier we were showing the kidney. And the individual elements, the individual 3D meshes that make up this 3D model are tagged with anatomical structure IDs. And those can then be linked with the cell types that should normally be found by them. And of course, that is not always the case. We're currently working on verifying that with experimental data and creating cell type populations, but that would be probably a whole different hour to talk about this. the most important thing is that we can use these 3D models in the organ gallery. So the organ gallery does one thing. I already talked about the exploration user interface where you can fly into the human body and inspect a tissue block. But we were asking, what if instead of viewing this on a two-dimensional screen, you could actually view it in VR? All of these organs are already modeled to human size. What if you could stand next to basically your digital twin, which is of course not very parameterized towards you, but what if you could do that? You could stand next to it, and then we could use the full force of VR input devices and natural interaction to interact with the data. So this is what the organ gallery currently looks like. You can see that on the right side here. We have the two humans in the middle, again, in the full scale. You can also see we have this organ selection keyboard here, which I will demo live in a second. And then we have this viewing box over here that allows you to individually inspect specific organs. And with that, I think it is time to quickly demonstrate this. I'm gonna jump in here. All right, so now here we are in Unity, and I think I might have to restart Unity real quick. While we're doing that, we can have a brief look at this again. You can see that we have this is a so-called anatomical theater. So this is the environment where the organ gallery currently is. And let's see how far along this is. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm gonna stop sharing here. Start sharing here. All right, so now we are in the organ gallery, and I'm gonna go into play mode. I'm using here what's called the XR device simulator. Mudrika, do you want to explain what the XR device simulator is?
Yeah, so the XR device simulator it simulates the virtual reality environment, which we can actually access via the headsets, but we're actually doing it using a mouse here. And we have all these controls on the left-hand side that we can use to move, to rotate, to look, to grab all the organs, or all the input is mentioned on the left side. So now, so
Why don't you show
yeah,
it?
I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
It's almost like playing a game.
Yeah. So we use the WASD keys, just like in any game, to move forward, backward, and sideward. And we use, thank you. We use the mouse to rotate, to pan the view. And we use the Y and T keys for the right and left hand controllers respectively. I have clicked on the Y key to move the right hand controller. Sorry, I just I could just do it for me, like it's kind of.
Oh. What do you need to do?
Yeah, I just want to maybe explore the kidneys.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Oh, we just
So,
have to go to that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now that we're in the environment, we want to have a closer look at the kidney. Of course, we are developers, so we have specific, cheat codes here. We can actually move around in VR. Eventually, when we deploy this application, the user will not be able to walk. We want the user fixed in one place. Like we tested this with dozens of people, and most people had a terrible time navigating in VR. So everything comes to the user. In fact, this application is designed to be used while sitting. So you can see actually here, see how this, if you're in VR, it's right in front of you. It's a huge panel. But of course, we have special rights, so we can just walk in here. Now we can go in here. We can have a look at the kidneys ourselves if we want to. Here's the male left kidney, for example. But the user can't do that. So we give them this super panel here, where they can just press a button. So I'm going to press this kidney button here. And now see how it has turned green. And now the kidney is actually here. All right. Of course, again, this is development. Like this is version 0.8.2. This is pre-release, and you're actually looking at a development version here. But yeah, this is what we have worked on so far. And then very soon, the user will be able to actually rotate this organ, and Shreyas is going to talk about that here later. I want to briefly also show you what the environment looks like here. So I'm now in my scene view. This is where I can just kind of freely move around. If you've ever used the 3D software, you're going to be very familiar with this. This is where you can actually, grab stuff. You can move it around. You can rearrange your whole environment. And then if we zoom out, you can actually see where we are in the environment here. So we have this is called a skybox. This is essentially a cube map that's just wrapped around the scene, which gives you the impression that you're under a sky. Okay. And then we are inside of this thing here, which is the anatomical theater, which is modeled as a dome, which our excellent medical illustrator Ushma made. And then we have this glass enclosure in here. You can also see up here we have logos of all of the efforts that have funded the HRA and, by extension, also the organ gallery. Okay, good. Let's go back here to our presentation. Then I think it is time. Maybe it makes sense, Shreyas, for you to go next, just because we just talked about the organ gallery. So
Sure.
I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go over to... Actually, Shreyas, do you just want to share your screen?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So should I be sharing the slides?
Oh, right. Apologies, I had the slides here. Yeah, give me a sec. Just
I
like
can-
filming a podcast.
That should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Can you see everything?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, so I would like to start with giving a brief backstory and on how I got into this journey. So I started out, as I mentioned earlier, working as an intern with with an experiential marketing firm, and of course I had an indefinite love for gaming, which drove me through the VR world. Back then, like the latest piece of technology, as Professor Andy rightly said, so was HTC Vive, and it was cumbersome to work with because it was bulky, and to take it off, like we had a huge suitcase that we had to carry all the way there with the trackers and whatnot. So yeah, I think Professor has it there, so you might be able to show it. Oh yeah.
This is our Vive suitcase. So yeah.
Yeah, and then the setting up would take a lot of time, which was again a bit cumbersome, and it didn't give much of a good experience with the development. And I personally thought that this domain wouldn't go forward. Cut to 5-6 years later, when I started working with Professor Andy, and I see the developments that have been done with MetaQuest 2, and I was amazed by how far this development have come through, and how easy it has been made for us to work with these technologies and the number of packages that are available. So yeah, it gives a lot of and it provides me with a lot of enthusiasm and to work forward, and it's again very rewarding with that part. So moving on, I'll start with the project that with the HRA organ gallery. So Professor, if you can, with the next slide. Yeah, so grazing through the field of VR once again, as Mudrika explained, I was using an XR device simulator to simulate the work that I have done. So the first piece of code was to just check how the frame rates would affect if we went closer to a highly anatomically correct model, ranging from a 20% polygon count to an 80% polygon count. And that's just a piece of code that I wrote to just map the distance between the object to the organ which is there in the scene, and see how the frame rates were affecting when you are actually closer to the organ, because the end goal was to give the user the feel to see the organ in the virtual space and realize, oh, how beautiful this organ actually is, and see those tissue blocks themselves. And of course, we have to take care of the frame rates to give them the seamless experience going forward with that part. So yeah, and the second scene is actually just to find out the correct combination of organs that would give us the max frame rates. An interesting piece of code that I wrote was to just get all the triangle counts on every organ to see if our MetaQuest 2 can process the number of polygons. Fun fact, MetaQuest 2 can only process, I guess, 1.5 million triangles, Professor.
1 million is what they say in the dev
Yeah,
target.
yeah. To have the target frame rate of 72 FPS, I guess. But this scene right here with all the organs in place had over 7 million triangles. So that didn't bode well. So I think Professor did math and got some appropriate combination of organs in a set scene, which boosted our base frame rate from 35 to 65, which is actually a really good feat in my opinion. So yeah, this is basically how I started this improvement of the HRA organ gallery, and just to get acclimated with the technology, with the domain, and all the new changes that have been happening in this tech space. And in the next slide, we can see yeah, this is the same piece of code that was just calculating the distance. And here's a little interesting part with the line number 32 on the left image, where the sprite image has to face you when you are looking at the organ, so that you know how far you actually are from the organ. So yeah, this was a piece of interesting piece of code which I wrote that part. Is With the next slide, we'll move on to the next. Oh, the video didn't pop up. Oh yeah, okay. So there's this video which Professor said that I'm working on grabbing the organs and interacting with it, allowing the user to look and inspect closely. So Mudrika was kind enough to build this beautiful ring here that would indicate that oh yeah, the organ is right about here, and this is the safe space that you can visualize the organ from. So if you I think, is it okay if I demo this, or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
video?
absolutely. I got the version here of the slides with the video, but if you want to demo, that's even better. Let's do that.
Yeah, sure. I can demo that. I have the thing pulled up. So yeah.
Probably also good for our audience to catch a little bit of a break. We are bombarding them with content here.
Yeah. Okay. I think the screen's visible now.
Yeah, it is
Yes.
visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, I am using an XR device simulator to simulate the flow. This is exactly how it will be in the VR environment. So like I said, I'm using mouse to pan around and WASD to move forward. This is just to get on the level of the ring. So when we come in contact with the ring and we can point towards the ring and press the grab, this is how we can grab the ring and inspect the organ closely. So the moment you select an organ from the organ gallery in the dome, the organ will be instantiated in this ring, and you can interact with it closely. And if you were to leave it, and I guess yeah, like this, you have to catch it again.
Yeah, so obviously we use GitHub for tracking our issues and assigning our work. And one issue that we had for quite a while was that people gave us feedback that they really wanted to grab the organ. Like, you have all of these organs in front of you naturally, you want to pry them apart, you want to maybe blow them up and rotate them, and things that you can't do that on a 2D screen. Like, you could give the user the ability to rotate it and move it in on 2D screen, but it is so much more complicated. In VR, all you have to do is like grab it with your hand. So I'm glad that we finally got this one to run.
Yeah.
Shreyas, my thought is that, you know, the problem is the XR device simulator, using that here is very convenient, but ultimately, I think this is where you're gonna have to test it in VR to really see if it feels right. But
It feels right. Yeah, sure.
have you had a chance yet to try it out in VR and see how?
I did try it, but then I had to come back here and I forgot the VR back home. So yeah, once I get back home, I'll make sure that I do it again. Sure.
Yeah, it's gonna feel good. I don't know if you spotted that in the main scene, but the ring is already in there and your scripts are attached to it. It's just now I have to implement the piece where when the user calls an organ and it comes, it has to be parented to the ring so that it can actually be.
Yeah, so that it will be grabbed and move forward.
Right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Reyes.
Yeah.
Okay, Mudrika. We're not gonna change to a different VR project, but just as important. All right. Let's get our ducks in a row here. Okay, all right.
So I'm gonna give a little bit of background on how I got into VR first. So I was introduced to this field like game development with Unity when my friend took a course in 2020, 2021 time. And then I was, like really amazed by how he could create games and, those immersive experiences in Unity. And I went on to take a game programming course during my undergrad's final year. This course didn't fully align with what I expected. I wanted it to be a very hands-on thing where I could create my own game kind of thing. But then it was very theoretical, and you can see one of the slides over here. It's a screenshot from one of my lecture slides. And we just had to read the code and produce it in the exam, and that's not what I wanted to do. And I was kind of busy at the time with my master's applications and all that, so I had to let VR be. In 2023, I had the chance to take an introductory Unity course for VR, and then I worked on a couple of academic projects in the course, which really sparked my interest in this field again. And this is a small video of what we did in class. I'm gonna, yeah, so it's just a model, dancing to the music. This was really fun when I was building it, and there are a lot of concepts that went into it, like particle system, audio mixing, animations, animation controller, state machines, etc., etc. And after working on all these academic projects and all that, I developed more interest in the field, and then I started working on this project with Professor Andy. It's called Lateral Thinking on VR. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll watch that again.
Yeah, yeah. How do you go to the next slide? Yeah. So about this project, Lateral Thinking on VR. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there are huge protests all around the world in online activism and conspiracy theories against COVID-19 vaccines and lockdowns. And one such movement, Querdenken, it arose in Germany. And the Telegram became a hub for all the communications during that movement because of its low content regulation. In this project, we have made a interactive virtual reality visualization that explores the communication patterns through when the movement started and how it went on, to explore how it grew. And it explores all the Telegram channels and groups involved in that movement. In this application, we have 3 different vignettes of visualizations. One is a 3D network graph of channels and groups, which you can see over here. The other one is a geospatial layout of the map of Germany, which you see on this table. And the third one is a geospatial and topical map that corresponds to all the groups and channels to where they originated. And they're of different sizes based on the numbers and topics that they're discussed in the groups. My main work in this project has been building the tutorial guide. It is an audio tutorial. It's about 5 minutes long with a detailed explanation about the project and the application and the controls.
I'm gonna reshare real quick with sound
Yes.
so that we actually get the sound
Yeah,
on screen as
this doesn't actually have sound because
Okay.
I recorded it and
well. Okay,
I was using it in VR and then someone did not record the sound.
okay. Well, the
Um,
sound will be replaced eventually anyway.
so what you see here is the particle system. We have used colors that reflect the German flag, and I have clicked skip to the end so that you can see the particle guide, the tutorial guide moving. We have a menu to skip the chapter or to skip the whole tutorial together or replay the tutorial. We're working on creating a drop-down menu for the user to select a chapter, and we're also working on other menus to for the user to be pausing the
We
chapters,
got 10 more
etc.
minutes, by the way.
Okay, thank you for the heads up. And we have the visualization. All these visualizations are interactive. We used brush and link concepts to compare both the visualizations. That is, when you hover over a node in one visualization, the corresponding node gets highlighted in the other visualization. And when the user selects a node, there's a screen on the left-hand controller of the user, and on that you get the name of the entity and the number of messages in that group or channel. And if the user selects a node, all the other nodes in the visualization change color. This is for the topical map on the table. And the colors change based on the similarity between the topics from green to red, which means that the darkest tint of green is that the selected node has a lot of similarity, and the red color means that it has very less similarity with the selected node. Yeah. So you can see the demo here. I am using my right controller to just hover over nodes in the geospatial, the topical visualization, and the other one gets highlighted.
So this is the same network twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I just clicked on a node and everything else changed colors based on the similarity. This is an interesting feature where you can just rearrange the, reset the colors. And then I just clicked on another node using my left-hand controller. And then you can see the name of the entity and the number of messages in it. This is some code which I've used in building the tutorial, and in this code, this is for actually animating the particle system, which you saw earlier when it was just moving randomly. I use the inside unit sphere to generate random points inside a unit sphere of radius, which I just tweaked while working on the application. And this is a sphere that is centered at the origin position, which is the particle system's default position. And using this part of the code, we are linearly interpolating, that is moving the particle system from its current position to the target position given by the random unit sphere. In this code, using this code, we are checking where the user is standing. So what happens is we have two parts of the tutorial. One is the introduction, and the other is the visualization. So when the user is outside of the living room, standing on a particular place, the introduction chapters of the tutorial are played, and we are checking where the user is standing based on the box colliders, which we attach to those markers. And when you're standing on a certain marker, for example, the introduction marker, we play the introduction chapters, and when you're on the visualization marker, the visualization chapters are played. We use this code to make the tutorial guide move from outside the living room to the living room, that is from the introduction place towards the visualization. We have used the lean tween package. This is a very easy thing to work with. Like, it has made the coding very easy, or else I would have had to run a couple of loops and made it more complex than it actually is. Yeah, so the lean tween path, it takes waypoints in a multiples of 4, and then it makes a path out of it using the Bezier path function. And then this path, we can input it to the move function. And this is the tutorial guide, the actual game object which has to move. These are the points, the waypoints, and this is the duration in which you want the particle to move from this place to another target destination. And using this function, it's orienting towards the path that is rotating in the path which it's moving in. And it moves with a delay of 3 seconds so that the user isn't overwhelmed because it's just turning. And
Yeah, maybe you can go back to that video
Yeah.
where you can actually see it move and see what it does.
yeah, maybe we.
Yeah.
It's working.
So here you can see how it moves inside the unit sphere, right?
Yeah.
Then you click the button. And then
And it goes back to the origin position, and then it starts moving inside towards the living room.
it's really funny.
Yeah.
So one thing I like about this is, let's say if we look at this again, initially we have these movements, and of course, this is all random. And as you know, randomization can be like humanized. Like if we could, for example, use something like Perlin noise to make those movements a lot more natural.
Yeah.
Okay. Right now it's really just, we just use Unity's randomizer, which, whatever that does. So we could take that piece of your code and replace it with something that makes it look more natural.
Yeah.
Same thing then for the lean tween thing. Currently we have waypoints in there, but maybe there could be a different way of. I know Unity has a nav mesh system that we could potentially use there as well. But what you see here is how hard it is to make it like human, right?
Yeah.
But it is already pretty amusing, like seeing that things swirl around. It is really funny. Excellent.
Yeah, that's about my work on this project.
Thank you, Mudrika. Great work. All right, I think it's time for us to wrap up. So I'm gonna stop sharing this one. All right, now I would like to do some acknowledgements just to finish up our hour. I want to acknowledge, of course, Ushma Patel, who is our excellent medical illustrator, who made the anatomical theater and who also provided expert input into the user experience for the organ gallery. And of course, Mudrika and Shreyas, thank you so much for working with me this semester and hopefully also next semester, and for all of the work that you put into the VR development, and for agreeing to doing this nerdy hour with me. I enjoy those deeply every year. I want to also acknowledge Lu Shen, who is my co-investigator on a junior investigator jumpstart grant for the organ gallery as part of NIH HubMap, and of course my PI, Kadi Bono. Right, with that, here's an acknowledgement text. This is our entire team here at CNS. You might have seen that in some of our other presentations. And then here's some references, papers, and now it would be your turn for questions. I probably don't have much time left, but the chat will have been open the entire time for questions, of course. So thanks, everybody, and on with the show.